As you may be aware, ever since last year's 70th anniversary, we've been picking out some of the revealing gems in the Woman's Art Archive. Today, it's 1962, when Joan Hamer described her account of using a wheelchair. We don't have any details of how she suddenly became disabled, but anyone who used a wheelchair then did not get the respect they would have now. Plonker, she found, was the most common insult.
I've just about completed the first 6 months of my new life on wheels. After about 7 months in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, surrounded by wheelchairs, I was sick of the sight of them. To begin with, I didn't want to have one. I rather horrified the padre by saying I'd rather be bedridden. But I felt that in bed one could appear to be just anyone with a cold or something. I soon got that nonsense knocked out of me by my very sweet but tough Australian physiotherapist. "Come on, Mrs. H, live dangerously," was her battle cry, as I went through balancing, weightlifting, archery, table tennis, swimming, and so on. Then I had to fight like hell to get out of being put into a wheelchair home for rehabilitation. I felt I'd rather die than be part of a wheelchair gang. So the first day out was marvellous. I felt so free, like being home from boarding school. But my feeling of elation didn't last. I found that in some extraordinary way I felt shy and sort of embarrassed when I met relatives and friends. I still blush when I meet people I knew before. I can't explain why. I'd been looking forward to going shopping, so we went on the first afternoon I was out. The first thing I saw was a man in a chair. He waved and shouted, "Hello." I imagined he must be from hospital, but I didn't recognize him. So I just looked rather coldly at him, as anyone might, being hailed by someone one didn't know. I passed about 20 chairs that afternoon. They were collecting for something or other. They all waved, beamed cheerfully, and hailed me as a long-lost sister. Well, honestly, was I shocked and indignant? I can't describe my feelings. Until finally I laughed and laughed. I had at last realized that I was one of the wheelchair gang, or plonker, as we are called. Whether I liked it or not, wanted to be one or not, I am one. I just can't wheel around saying, "Oh, there's someone in a chair." It must be, "Oh, there's one of us, another plonker." I suppose eventually it becomes normal. The attitude of babies and small children is fascinating. Babies in prams obviously take you for one of them. I'd noticed before how small babies looked at each other. It's quite a special look. Nowadays they look at me like that, if we're parked outside a shop near together. Mind you, it's not always a friendly look by any means, but I'm sure it's something you'd never experience unless you had been mistaken for another baby. Older children in prams just look rather puzzled, as much as to say, "She's a whopper." But as for the grown-ups, really, their behaviour is a menace. Now, I know people are very kind and want to be helpful. I'm jolly grateful to lots of people for their help and kindness. But some people are maddening. To begin with, it seems to be taken for granted that if you're in a wheelchair, you must be mentally retarded or deaf or both. I swear that if I'm left outside a shop for 10 minutes, at least 2 people will come up to me, pat me on the head and screech such things as, "We are wearing pretty booties today, aren't we?" Or, "Are we having a lovely walkie?" This even happens when I'm sitting there minding my own business, reading a paper, which I do for protection. And they talk to whoever is pushing me with the most nauseating manner, saying things like, "How is she? Does she feel the cold? Will she ever walk again?" Just as if I weren't there. Honestly, it's amazing. And I must explain that I don't look or act daft. I'm not disfigured in any way. I'm paralyzed from the waist down, but you can't see anything unusual. I realize that some people can be tactless or clumsy. They sound sort of condescending from sheer shyness, nervousness, or embarrassment. But these complete strangers who go out of their way to pat and question bewilder me. Another thing that's most irritating is the way people lean on you, or rather on your chair. but to me they might just as well be leaning on me. They either lean on the armrests and breathe in one's face, or they put their hands on the handles at the back, bend over your shoulder, so that you have to screw your neck round to breaking point and roll your eyeballs round so far that I imagine only the whites are showing. Then people are inclined to hang things on you, scarves, ties, or belts. One day in a pub, a stranger actually hung his raincoat and umbrella on the back of my chair. I put an advertisement in a daily newspaper and weekly for a ground floor with its lift suitable for wheelchair to rent in or around London. I got one answer, offering a house for sale right up in the north of England. At last I've been put on a housing list, but they say it may take 2 years. For the moment, I'm living in what can only be described as a corridor room, as everyone has to come through it to get into the kitchen. The nicest thing is when you suddenly realize how independent you're becoming, like washing your own hair, putting coal on the fire. Oh, lots of things. In fact, there's practically nothing one can't do from a wheelchair if you have the right surroundings and lots of practice. There's one thing that's rather strange. I've always dreamed a lot. I still do. But I have never dreamed I'm in a wheelchair. And I've never met a plonker who has. Funny, isn't it?